Okay, looking at your study guide that you turned in today, and the multiple choice is going to be worth, for this one, it's going to be worth 55 points. Now, don't freak out. I'm not actually giving an accuracy grade for the study guide, but I do want you to see how the points will more or less break down for the test on Friday. So, the multiple choice part of the test was worth 55 points. And that part is kind of graded immediately, and you'll know what your grade is. The graphing part is going to be worth 45 points. And again, don't freak out because those 45 points include does it open or up or down, and line of symmetry, and the y-intercept. So there's some pretty easy questions to even the graphing question. So just because it says graphing 45 points, like I'm not looking just at your final graph. I'm looking at each of those 5 steps to see how you did. So on what you turned in today, and everyone's turned in their study guide today, the average was 44 points. So 44 out of 55, that's pretty good. I did have at least a couple that scored a high of 55. A couple lower than that. I'll talk to you individually or reach out to you via email. But I did want to go ahead and go over the study guide here and give you this breakdown so that you'll kind of know what's coming as we move forward. So at this point, it looks like the problems that were missed the most were numbers. That's not numbers. Numbers 3 and 6, followed closely by 5 and 4, and then at least one of us missed number 2, so we'll take a look at number 2. And then one of you, and I don't know who, but one of you I don't know who because I haven't looked yet, but one of you missed number 7, which in the instructions, like I think it said just to mark true. So mark true, and then you're going to submit all of that work later. So I don't know why somebody missed number 7, but there it is. Now I'm going to go over the multiple choice answers. I think you can view your own grade at this point. So if you log back in, I think there's a grade book option. If you're not sure how, let me know. I'll send you an article, maybe, or it'll be in the help section somewhere. That'll help you see your grade. Again, average was 44, high was 55. Like, that's pretty good. This very closely resembles what you'll see on Friday. So let's take a look at a couple of these problems. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I tell you what, why don't we just take them in order here? We'll start with number 2. That's not the order that was most important as far as who missed what, but let's start with number 2, and we'll just do 3, 4, 5, and 6. No one missed number 1, by the way. So number 2, we're looking at x squared equals 1 over 16, and so we got to get x squared by itself, which means we've got to take the square root of both sides. The square root of x squared is simply going to be x. And then let me do it this way, and maybe it'll help you see what's happening over here. So the plus or minus square root of 1 over 16 really means the plus or minus square root of 1 over the plus or minus square root of 16. And so here I think you can see it a little bit better. You're going to have a plus or minus answer, square root of 1, square root of 16, and then that would be your answer, x equals plus or minus 1/4. Okay. Number 3 was a problem that was already set up to be solved just the way it is. Now, a lot of different ways you could work this, but let me just again point this out that you have a perfect square already by itself. And so if I square root both sides of the equation, then square rooting on the left simply gets rid of the exponent, and so we're left with x minus 3. But square rooting on the other side gives us a plus or minus, and the square root of 49 is 7. Okay. Now, I do think one of the wrong answers that I saw someone put down was plus or minus 7. But please notice that at this point we're not done yet. We have to get x by itself. So we've got to add 3 to both sides of the equation. Okay, so that gets our x all by itself, and then we've got 3 plus or minus 7 that we can do. Okay, so 3 plus 7 is 10. 3 minus 7 is -4, and then that would have been our answer. Number 4 was set up very similar in that we already have a perfect square over here by itself, and so simply square rooting both sides is going to clear off that exponent, so we just have x plus 5 left over, and then we've got the plus or minus square root of 28 on the right hand side. Now I leave it as plus or minus square root of 28 because you need to know that that 28 either breaks down into a perfect square or it doesn't break down into a perfect square. So 4 times 7 is what we're looking at. The square root of 4 is 2. The square root of 7 won't come out, and we've still got x plus 5 on this side. So subtracting 5 from both sides, we get -5 plus or minus 2 square roots of 7. Now, in looking at your, if you're looking at your quiz or looking at your test, you might notice that this is not one of the answers. Nope, I take it back. It is one of the answers. Never mind. That's the answer. So problem number 5 is quadratic formula type problem. We're already set equal to 0. You just have to recognize that A equals 1, B equals 4, C equals -77, and then you've got to be able to plug in and actually get to the right number. So let's make sure that you're plugging in correctly. Minus B plus or minus the square root, and we've got B squared 4AC all over to A. Alright, so make sure that that's how you got it plugged in. I'm going to clean some of this up here just to make sure you can see it all. So that's how it should plug in. From here, let's talk about some order of operations stuff. Like this is a grouping symbol. So let's get everything inside that grouping symbol. And I don't know why I wrote minus B. I should have wrote minus B, which is 4. So there we go. Sorry about that. Let's go and clean up that that radical. So we've got 4 squared is 16, and then notice you have a negative times a negative, so this is going to be plus something, and then 4 times 77 gives us 308, okay, and it's all over 2a. Well, we're going to go ahead and say 2 times 1 is 2. I think that's easy enough to do. The 16 plus 308, again, still simplifying inside that radical, is going to give us 324, and then you're not going to recognize that maybe, but your calculator will let you take the square root of 324, and you're going to get 18. So we've got -4 minus 4 plus or minus 18 all over 2. Okay, so that means that we're going to do -4 plus 18 and get 14 over 2. And we're going to do -4 minus 18 and get -22 all over 2. And then both of those are going to simplify to the answers that we're looking for, which is 7 and -11. So those are the answers we were looking for. That was answer number C. So number 6 is another one that is already a quadratic set equal to 0. And so we recognize that A equals 6, B equals 17, C equals 12. Substituting into our quadratic formula, which I hope you've got the quadratic formula on that note card of yours, as well as maybe how we did those first couple of problems. So negative B plus or minus the square root, B squared minus 4 AC, and that's going to give us some big numbers in there, but maybe it works out well. And then we're all over 2a, which in this case is not a 1, it's a 6, so we actually have something to do with there. Again, grouping symbol there, we've got to simplify inside the radical first. So -17 plus or minus 17 squared is going to be 289. let's see, 4 times 6 times 12 is going to be 288. All over, let's go and do 2 times 6 on the bottom there and get 12. Okay, so 289 minus 288, a little simplifying right there inside the radical, that's just going to give us a 1. And so we're looking at negative 17 plus or minus the square root of 1, 1, all over 12. Okay, so we're going to do negative 17 plus 1 and get negative 16 over 12. We're going to do negative 17 minus 1 and get negative 18 over 12. And then both of those fractions will simplify. 16 over 12 has a 4 in common, so that's negative 4 thirds. And 18 and 12 have a 6 in common, so that's negative 3 halves. And so that would be negative 4 thirds, negative 3 halves would be the answer. And I believe that was A. Okay. So there's the first 6 problems. Those were the multiple choice. Again, you're going to see your answer to those pretty quickly, just because they grade instantly. As far as the test goes, it grades instantly. Number 7 is going to be a little more interesting as far as how I get your grade to you. Again, 7 is worth 45 points between the 5 parts of the problem that we would do. So the equation that we were working off of was y equals x squared plus 2x minus 1. And so let's talk about the 5 steps that we go through, the 5 questions that we answer. 1, does it open up or down? And that simply comes from whether or not the x squared term is positive or negative. In this case, it's positive, and so this one opens up. Okay. B, the second part of the question is the equation of symmetry, the axis of symmetry. So x equals negative b over 2a is what you're looking for. Again, this is one of those things that both of these questions ought to be worded on your note card some way. So let's take negative b over 2a, and we get negative 1. Assuming I've done my math right, that's negative 1. And so my axis of symmetry is x equals negative 1. So we've opened up and we're at x equals negative 1. When we go to find our vertex simply means we're going to plug in our axis of symmetry into our equation. So remember that our equation from the very top is x squared plus 2x minus 1. We're going to substitute in x equals negative 1 to find out what y should equal. So we're going to go negative 1 squared. Notice that I grouped that because I need for the negative to be squared as well. Plus 2 times negative 1 minus 1. So here we go. Negative 1 squared is positive 1. And then we have minus 2 minus 1 as we finish that on out. And so y is going to equal negative 2. 1 minus 2 minus 1 gives us negative 2. And so that's our vertex. Our vertex is x equals negative 1, y equals negative 2. Okay, so that's what we're looking for. Now the other thing I hope that you're seeing here, and I know I organize my work maybe a little more tightly than you do. Please feel free to spread your work out some. But when you turn in that scratch work, like this is, I'm not looking for you to just replicate exactly what I'm doing, but this is the process. Like I'm trying to make this as simple and as concise as I can. This is the process that we're looking for. So part D said let's find the x and y intercepts. So we said that the y-intercept is super easy to find because it's simply the constant that sticks at the end of the equation there. So y-intercept would tell you that x equals 0, and x equals 0 means 0 squared is 0, 2 times 0 is 0, And so y would equal just -1. That's the reasoning behind. So finding our y-intercept is easy. Look for the constant, the number that's all by itself at the back. And so your y-intercept would be -1. Your x-intercept is a little more involved to get there, but it's the quadratic formula. So we're going to take the a, b, and c and plug them into the quadratic formula and solve. So we got -2 plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And then we're going to solve that. We're going to simplify all of that. Again, keep in mind the radical is a grouping symbol. And so we've got to make sure we work inside that radical first. 2 squared is 4. And then we've got 4 times 1 times 1, which is just 4. But we've got 2 minuses, so that's going to end up being a plus 4. And then that's all over 2a, which is just 2. So simplify it just a little bit more. We end up with -2 plus or minus the square root of 8 all over 2. That 8 will simplify as a radical. It's 4 times 2. So the square root of 4 is 2. That would get to come out. The square root of 2 does not get to come out. And so we've got -2 plus or minus 2 square roots of 2 all over 2. And guys, this is just us simplifying. So get close in here somewhere, and you're going to get credit as long as you're showing me the work. I'm showing you the process. I'm showing you the order of operations that we go through to get to a final answer. Now the last step on here, and I don't want to get it too small, but I do want to go and try to finish this. So one thing we said was when we're finishing up these problems is we take the numerator and we separate it into its pieces, and then each piece of the numerator gets the denominator, because each one of those is going to simplify. So -1 plus or minus square root of 2, as ugly as that is, those are our x-intercepts, and we don't know exactly where that is unless we take a calculator and plug it in and do the calculation. But those are our x-intercepts. The very last part of this problem is to put all of this stuff together. Part E says graph it. Okay. Now, one of the things that we said as we were working through several of the other study guides was what we're really doing here is we're really just sketching it. I'm not looking for you to be exact. I am looking for some key pieces to be in key places, and so I want to make sure we show that to you right here. So here's our coordinate plane. I'm going to graph in green. Green is kind of fun. So we know that it opens up. That was the first thing we talked about. We know that our axis of symmetry is, and I'm going to put it in pink here. So our axis of symmetry is back here at x equals -1. Okay, there's our axis of symmetry. Our vertex is -1, -2. So there's our vertex. Y-intercept was a -1. Okay. Symmetry says that we've got a point over here too, because it's the same distance away from the line on the other side. So symmetry says we've got another point over there. And then our x-intercepts, the numbers down here that don't look very pretty, you could plug those into a calculator and figure out exactly what they are. But at this point, if they don't work out to be whole numbers, we're just kind of sketching that in there. So that should be what your graph should look like. If it doesn't, we probably need to talk. You probably need to look over this again, figure out what piece you're missing, and we'll do that. Let me know if you have any questions.